Hey folks, it's time for our Friday review. Well, I'm going to do something a little different this time. We've done two pretty important shows in the last couple of weeks. We done one on the silver squeeze, and then we did one on breaking down what fractional reserve banking is. And then there's some new things that have happened recently. So I'm going to combine all three of those things into our review today. And I'm going to try to do something that's very intentional because of how significant these stories are. I don't want to make them seem like hype. I want to talk slower than I usually do. I want to keep my tone low. I just want to have this as information. I don't want to have this as anything that's clickbait. I don't want to have it as anything that's setting, any kind of emergency status. What I look at and what I've always looked at is God said my role was to come out at the end and to deliver what God has put in my spirit, which is based on a massive amount of information that allows me to go back and look at history and combine that with current events and see patterns. So I'm not going to get into details. I'm going to talk about pattern recognition and about giving you the opportunity to see what's happening from the 60,000 square foot view. So let's go back, and we'll go back 2 weeks, and I'll kind of open the same way I did. We're not going to use slides today. I'm just going to be talking. I call this kind of like a rant. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to reframe where we started a couple of weeks ago. And I said that in my opinion, I thought that on Christmas, we actually began the process of the transfer of wealth, going from the system of the wicked to the system of the righteous. And I referred to Kim Clement. And I said, I thought that in my opinion, that his prophecies that people have been looking at for years and saying, well, they didn't come true. I think they were actually fulfilled in Christmas when we walked into the silver squeeze that saw silver basically be uncoupled and basically be driven up by something that had not been controlled by before, which is what? Industrial demand. And since that time, we've seen silver go from 30 to 40 to 50 to 80 to if you're looking at prices across the sea, over $100 in some days. So I think we've walked into that. And I think what also has happened is Kim Clement said that there would be falls in the fall. Some would rise, some would fall. And I think with what's happened in Venezuela, that's certainly an indicator. A major player has been taken out, and he's now in U.S. custody, and he's giving us all kinds of information that is leading to things that are happening right now. I think that the real thing that sets this whole thing in motion is basically for the United States and other nations of the world to understand that we have for a long, long time had politicians that were controlled by the puppet masters, by the global financial elite, that were groomed and financed and placed into positions, in many instances using fraudulent elections, and they then pass laws that are inflicted upon us that are not in the best interest of the people, but that are basically used to create legal dictatorships. So I think all of that is coming down. I think that our eyes are being opened by the truth. And then just last night, I saw Carolyn Levitt on the podium in the White House, and she was with Tulsi Gabbard, and they were announcing that Donald Trump has been, whoa, stop, not that, that Barack Obama had been arrested, and she named a whole bunch of other people. So I think this whole process that God has had in store is unraveling in a very orderly fashion. And I just want to lay it out for you so you can see. So I'm going to now with that, I'm going to go back to 2 weeks ago when we talked about the silver squeeze. And what's happening is silver is being decoupled now, and it's not going to be able to be held down like it has in the past. So in the past, basically, the banks, particularly JP Morgan is one of them, they would hold silver prices down because they wanted to basically drive the fiat paper system. But now even JP Morgan, which is one of the big suppressors of silver, has changed 180 degrees. They got all the paper contracts. And a few weeks ago, when silver was about $60, they made one of the largest silver purchases that I've ever heard of being made by a bank. They bought $22 billion worth of silver. Now, at that time, people were saying, get out of silver. It's gone up so much, it's hit the top now. And what I see is that actual fact that happened is telling us no, silver is just beginning to rise, because they wouldn't put $22 billion into silver if they thought it had capped out. So what have we been hearing since? We've been hearing since that silver is decoupled and that the price of silver is going to be driven by industrial demand. And we've been hearing that silver, most of the principal silver deposits that are mining just for silver, they're played out. There's not that many of them. So most of the silver comes from as a secondary byproduct from mining for copper and other things. And to get those mines to increase production, the numbers that I'm hearing flying around is that silver probably has to go to something like $300. And so that's what's happening. That's what's driving this. And it all has to do with national security. So everything you hear Trump talking about is national security. So I guess it was probably a couple of months ago, he put in the National Production Act. And what was that about? That basically was acknowledging that America is kind of set back under all these other presidents which were controlled, in my opinion, by the shadow government and allowed China and Russia to go out and acquire natural resources. So now Trump is saying we have a bit of a squeeze on us on natural resources. And so this is making acquiring rare earth and lithium and silver and other things, strategically significant minerals, and he's going after them in every way he can. That has something to do with what's happening in Greenland. And the national security issue basically is saying that we have to have Alaska in order to have a buffer between us and Russia on the west. We have to have Greenland, very importantly, on the east, and we have to have the Panama Canal, and there are things happening there that looks like we're getting back control of that. And we just made a currency swap with Argentina so that they're very happy with us. And so those are the 4 seaports in the Western Hemisphere. And then he's going after the cartels, which is going to be very important to giving sovereignty back to Mexico and the Latin American nations in South America. And he's basically implementing the Monroe Doctrine that says the Western Hemisphere needs to be controlled by, I hope the word is, a benevolent, friendly America. I hope we're not going to go down the road that we've gone down in decades gone by under the global elite and committed hegemony. I hope we're going to give fair, honest treatment to all of our neighbors in the Western Hemisphere. So anyway, that's the show from 2 weeks ago. That's basically saying that there was a silver squeeze on. Silver's been decoupled, and its price is going to be driven by rarity, by it being a strategic mineral, and by basically what the demand for it is for not just industry, but for we're looking, like the prophets have said, it's going to look like we're going into World War III. I don't think we're going to, but it's going to look like we are. So from a strategic viewpoint, Trump has to make sure that there's enough silver for whatever we need for our military. So all of that is putting pressure on silver. And what we're seeing is silver has gone from 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 to 80 to over $100. And it's probably going to go to 100. So that's our show from 2 weeks ago. Then the show that we did this week was trying to let you know that this banking system is going in the direction of collapsing, but that's a good thing. We have to have that happen because what do we know? We know that he who controls money controls the world, and we know that the global financial banking system controls the money. Therefore, they control all the spheres of influence. They control the schools. They control the media. They censor us. They control the politicians. So we have to take the money away from the global financial elite, which is what is happening right now in the background, and that sets the stage for the reset, but not the evil people's reset, our reset, God's reset, the reset where we get out from under a financial system that's fiat that can inflict us with collapses at any time they want, with inflation and with deflation and with wage suppression and all the things that have left us in a position where year by year by year, our income that we have, our expendable income, discretionary income, has gotten less and less and less, into where people are now absolutely at the breaking point where they don't know. I went and bought something the other day at the grocery store, and I remembered back what that price was 6 months ago, and it's gone up 82%. 82%. Amazing. Not everything has gone up like that, but it just is an indicator as to where we're going. So prices are going up, not because they're more valuable, but because the dollar is going down. And by the way, Trump is intentionally trying to do that. He's putting pressure on the Fed to lower rates. He's saying he's going to get us out from the Internal Revenue Service and go to the External Revenue Service that is basically going to be funded by the tariffs that he did. And we've talked about this before. That's precisely what we did before. There's always a foreshadow. Following the Civil War, we put tariffs on England, and then we developed the Industrial Revolution. And so what is Trump getting ready to do now? The same thing, getting ready to go back to the economic system we had when we were founded, which is a simple tax, meaning in the coming months, we're probably going to get out from the Fed and the IRS, and that's going to be 25, 35% more money in your pocket. And when that happens and we go on to the new system that Trump is orchestrating, which is going to be based on gold and on silver and on Bitcoin and our strategic reserve, then basically trust comes back to the dollar. Then all of a sudden we're now looking like we're more stable. And Trump is saying that now what I'm going to do is something that they've never done before. Always they collapse the system with a fiat currency, and then they just start over again, and no effort is made to change it. But this is God's reset, and because of that, God has set up certain things that are going to allow Trump to do something that's never been done before. He's going to lower the value of our dollar. It's inescapable. There's too much pressure that's coming against the dollar with the silver squeeze that's going on, and with what BRICS is doing, and with Japan now being in a crisis and having to sell off our treasury notes. But that's actually got some good things associated with it, because that lowers the value of the dollar, which makes it cheaper to buy American-made goods. So there's always a silver lining. And all of this is leading to the collapse of the system that has controlled us, and leading to a new system that's based by commodities that function by the law of supply and demand. Gold and silver and wheat and oil all have uses, and because of that, they can't be manipulated. So we're going to go into a system that's going to give us stability. And then Trump, but when he came in the very first time, this has been going on for a long time, folks. He got the Supreme Court to hear what's called the Chevron case, and it was decided that there were 5,915 patents that have been suppressed, which contain some absolutely incredible technologies. We're going to be getting access to those. And Trump has now got nearly $20 trillion that's due to come into the United States to build manufacturing. And if you listen to him, he's been coming out and giving us some signals that he is going to start exposing that the Green New Deal should be called the Green New Scam, because those technologies are all still tied to the grid. They all pollute our planet. We'll never get to zero carbon with those technologies. Plus, they're the biggest consumers of silver of anything in the industrial arena. So I think in the coming months, if not Trump, me, are going to expose what those have. And what's something that's interesting, every nation is squeezing the other nation. We're squeezing nations with oil. BRICS is squeezing us with trying to get a gold-backed and silver-backed currency. I mean, we're in a Cold War now, just like we were when we were in a Cold War with Russia. It's not a kinetic war, at least not now, and I don't think it's going to be. But basically, there's economic pressure that's being put on by every nation in the world. And if we look around, this collapse is not like any other. There's always been one primary nation that falls and another strong nation that comes in and takes its place. So look around. Venezuela was a trigger. It's triggering the system of slavery that we've been under, where they've stolen our elections. Russia's go look at some feeds. Russia is in dire trouble. Iran just basically is toppling, and China is in crisis, and even America's in trouble. So basically, we're going through that system where God is tearing down the kingdoms of man, capitalism and communism, and going to implement a new system based on what? Based on his system of economics, which is based on all the gold is his, the silver is his, the cattle on 1,000 hills is his, and it's going to be based on commodity-backed systems that are ruled by supply and demand that can't be manipulated. And we're going to walk into the greatest period of economic revival the world has ever seen. And Donald Trump is going to walk us into just exactly what he promised, not only going to make America great, but make America greater than it's ever been, and show everything that's been done to suppress and enslave not just the United States, but all the people of the world. And when we finally realize what's been done to us, all the division and angst that they have is with race and with religion and with economics is going to fade away, and we're going to understand that God said the system would be brought down by a simple stone. That simple stone, I think we now know, is silver. And when all this happens, I just got a little thing that you may think I'm crazy, but I'm going to suggest you go look at it. God wants to make sure that he knows that when this happens, that we know that it was God who orchestrated all that. So go out and look at things that are happening around the world that have never happened before, where the weather is changing. Right now, there's snow in Florida. Last week, something happened that the geologist said could never happen. The coastline of California in some places rose 6 feet, and in other places 12 feet overnight. There are ships that are now sitting in the mud, and the geologist is saying, well, how in the world could that happen without an earthquake? And the seismologists are looking all over the world, and they're seeing swarms in all kinds of places along the Ring of Fire. Things are happening. And in China, go look at the weather in China. I mean, they're having water flow out of the ground where there was nothing. So a field's got like a fountain in it, and there's cracks in the ocean that have smoke, and there's ground that has smoke in them. And I mean, there's some amazing things happen. So God is doing supernatural things so that we don't look at this and say, oh, look what Donald Trump did, or look what the White Hats did. No, they wouldn't do any of this if it wasn't being accommodated by God. But what he's going to do is wake us up so that we see his hand is in this, and he's going to guide us through this. It's going to look scary, but we're going to come out the other end with freedoms that we've never, ever, ever had. But we have to basically bend the knee to God, and he's going to get his harvest of souls. So let's go back over to Iran for a second. Right now, in the midst of this chaos that's over there, they're bulldozing down mosques. People are being visited by Christ in Iran and are changing to Christianity. And there's an awakening happening in China and in Iran. And there's a huge Christian community in Africa. So we're going to go from the Muslims killing Christians, and from Christians being treated horribly, to an awakening of the spiritual awakening of the world. And we're going to recognize that God is facilitated all of this. So now I want to go deep into what we talked about earlier this week, and that is I want to redefine what fractional reserve banking is. And then I can go back and look at the patterns of what we've seen in the past. Fractional reserve banking is a situation that the Fed prints money out of nowhere, but the banks, your regular local bank, also prints money. You just don't know it. So they give you maybe 1% of interest on your savings account, but they always make sure that whatever interest rate they give you is less than the inflation rate. So when it all comes down to it, if you sit and look at money you put in a savings account, in every instance, you don't actually make money. It's not like that old saying, a penny saved is a penny earned. Because of inflation, you actually end up losing money when you put your money into a savings account. And then it gets worse. So now they charge on a personal loan, 7 to 10%. On a credit card, 18 to 30%. Then they take that money, and what they do, so now there's thousands of dollars that are coming out of that revenue stream. And I'll just make it simple. I'll just use a small number, $1,000. So basically they take $1,000 and they loan that to somebody. And according to the system that we're under, the fractional bank reserve system, they can loan 90% of that out. But that's not the end of it. Then they can loan 90% of the 900 out, and then 90% again, and 90% again, until that $1,000 has become maybe $10,000 that they're making 7 to 10% on, or 18 to 30% on, and you see the corrupt system that they have. And then when it comes to your homes, we don't own homes. We are all renters of the government, and they have a system that I'm going to be talking about. I talked about it some now, and I'm going to do a show next week specifically on this, where basically they orchestrate these collapses, and then they come in and we lose our jobs, we get behind on our taxes or on our mortgage payment, and they take the house. That's not the system that our founding fathers founded. It was based on Spanish land grants, on something called an ODO ownership. And what it did is it created a situation where once you paid your property off, the government could not take it. So you actually had real ownership there. So I'm going to be disclosing some things in the coming weeks. I've got a new book coming out, and I'm going to do a blitz on the market. The book is Liberty Crusade, Restored Republic. I'm going to be putting out probably 100 or more 1-minute shorts. and I'm going to do something that I don't think anybody else has done. I'm not going to allow myself to be kept in the constraints of what the current legal system says we can do, because those laws were passed by people that were intent on setting up legal dictatorship. So I'm going to tell you that we don't need 1,000-page laws. I'm going to tell you that in every one of these instruments of suppression, that we could write a bill on a napkin. So I'm going to tell you what common sense legality looks like that gives the American people freedom from our financial oppressors. So please look for that. The book will be coming out on pre-sale. I think I'm going to release it on Valentine's Day. I don't know why. I just think that's kind of a cool date. And then I think we're going to release it for sale on March, probably the 6th, I think. So we're working out those final details with the publisher, but look for that. And for those of you who bought my first book, you know that it's a very, very quick read, written at a 6th grade level, that gives you the history of America, what the founding principles were, discloses the fact that we are not a democracy, that's communism. We are a republic, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And basically, it tells you so that you need to understand how we've been enslaved. That's why I'm doing these two shows. You need to know how the fractional banking system works and how any contract you have with the bank, you lose. When you put your money in the bank, it becomes their money. And here's what I want to tell you to look for. We're now going into that reset cycle. I think it started at Christmas, and I think we are winning. The white hats are winning, but there's always a pattern. If we go back to other collapses, if we go to Greece, if we go to Zimbabwe, if we go to Argentina, the first thing they do is they start to put some kind of a limitation on how much money you can get out of the bank on any given day. So I would just say here, if we look at the pattern, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm seeing that pattern with all the squeezes, the squeeze on oil, the squeeze on silver, and the banking system going to lose a lot of money when they finally have to claim force majeure on all these silver contracts, and the big banks that are heavy into that are going to have multi-billion-dollar obligations to fulfill their contracts when they declare force majeure. It's going to cause banking crisis. And then with what happened in Venezuela and with Iran falling and the amount of oil that they made, it looks like going to be possible instability in the oil market. So all of that is leading to instability, which says that the pattern that we've seen in the past is very likely to start being repeated soon. First step is always to limit the amount of money you can get on, because they don't want to have a run. So let's look back and look at some of the things that have happened in the past. So when we go back 20 years, in Greece, they passed a law that said that they could do bail-ins, and they took some of the money from the people right out of their bank accounts. Well, after Frank Dodd, we did the same thing in 2008. So now we have something that's legislative law that says if this banking system gets bad, that they not only have the ability to basically do bail-ins, which is where basically we pay for the bad business investments that the bankers made, but they can actually come in and take our money as well. So that happens. But basically they just make it tighter and tighter and tighter. At some point they start looking at the large amounts of money going out and scrutinizing them carefully. And they're looking for money laundering. They're looking for money that's leaving the country. So basically, they just start suppressing the systems. And then if there is a run, because here's what else happened. Now we get to COVID. And what they did during COVID is they said, the fractional banking services system is under a lot of pressure because of this lockdown. So we're going to change the rules, and we're going to say, you don't have to keep 10% anymore. There's no limit. You don't have to keep any specified amount. Some banks kept their 10% or even more, but there are other banks that were weak that maybe don't have anything. So what we've done is we've gotten into a weakened banking system that makes it possible for there to be situations that arise where the banks get in financial difficulty. That's what I think is coming. So I just want you to be aware of it. I want you to say that the prevention is worth a pound of cure. So what I have done is I have invested in some silver. I'm not telling you to do it. I've invested in XRP, which God told me personally was going to be the world's reserve currency, and no individual had ever had an opportunity to invest in that. I've invested in some currencies, the dinar and the dong, and everything is beginning to look like that the banking system is finally, after 20 some years, now looking at that and seriously considering refinancing those currencies. And then I went to the bank and I just took some money out and brought it home. I bought some extra food. I've got some cash on hand just in case they do start to limit the amount of money that we can get out of the bank in any one day, which is always what happens when the banking system starts to fall. So that's just kind of an update of what's happened in the last several weeks, and we've never seen anything like it. Time has sped up and everything is happening. And like I said, I believe we walked into the beginning of the financial reset with Christmas, with the throwing of that stone, which was silver. So I'm not saying anything specific. I'm not trying to make this sound more scarier than it is. I'm just saying to say the pattern is repeatable. It repeats over and over, and it's repeating right now. And so just go out and get yourself informed and do whatever you think is right to protect your family. So with that, I think I'm done for the day, and I want to bless you all. And I just go out and look at those earth changes. I think it'll blow your mind. It's snowing in Florida right now. So and up here it's 60 degrees. It should be 10 degrees here, and it should be 70 degrees in Florida. And I mean, things are happening. And down in Florida, by the way, they're having massive sinkholes. They're having the same thing over in China. I mean, it's incredible. We're having geological changes happen that just never happened, and certainly not with this frequency. So I think God's hand is moving. He's moving on the financial scene. He's moving on the political scene. He's moving on the geological scene, and he's most definitely moving on the spiritual scene. So with that, God bless you all. We'll see you next week, and this is tentative, but I think I'm going to do a piece on the housing because I'm concerned for the young people who are not able to buy houses. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you what the law could be. I'm going to tell you what they've done to us to make it so that you kids can't buy homes and how simple it would be to fix it. So it takes me a little bit of time to put those together, and this is going to be a busy weekend, but that's what I hope to do next week. So especially you young kids, you Generation Z and you millennials, come back and watch me next week and see that. So where you want to go is this channel, which is Liberty Crusade Official on Rumble and on YouTube. You can visit me on my website at larryballard.com, and I'm also on a number of other people's shows. But anyway, start following. Click that like button. It'll help our revenue, and basically revenue, and it'll help the following that we have. And basically, what God told me is He would hold me. I've been at this since my near-death experience in 1968. Gathering all this information to put here so I could release it at the right moment in time. And God said, I'll catapult your platform when the financial collapse begins. And I think that's where we're at now. And He said, the message that I've put in you, the patterns that I've allowed you to see are going to open people's eyes so the truth can set them free. So folks, we're about to cross over into the promised land. And I think it's going to be amazing. We're going to have everything restored. Relationships are going to be much better when we're not under stress. We'll have time to get to know our families, and we're going to have no financial stress. I mean, one of the biggest stresses on marriages is family stress, and I believe God is going to do things to heal us. So the best is yet to come. It's going to look a little shaky, but every day I promise myself, don't be in fear. No matter what happens, understand God is in control. So with that, please join me next week. Be blessed.